Okay, friends, today I am helping with group pictures in the main gym, so I am not here. And turns out the man, thank you, Logan, for posting a picture of the man. He doesn't seem to go through the first couple, the explore and the investigate. And so I decided I'll just make my own video. Won't be nearly as good as his, but one can try. So we're in unit 7. We're going to look at libraries now. So it starts in lesson 5 with the explore. And so in the warm up it talks about how could you share a function with another person so that they could then use it in their program. Well, there's lots and lots of, things that they could do. We figured out early in CSP that it wasn't quite as easy as we thought it was going to be. We had to email code to each other. You could use a shared document. But, other than that, two people working on the same program ended up being a little bit more complicated than we thought that it, should have been. So have you ever wanted to share code with a friend so that they could use it to put something cool in their program? So how can we easily share functions? Well, that is to create a library. So we have these functions that we talked about previously. We have make cake, we have cake cost, and we have average cake. And so each of those are individual functions. And so, think about or envision putting them all together in a folder and then sending that folder off to a friend. And so this is called a library. So you can see here on the screen, a library is a collection of functions that can be used in many different programs. Makes sense? So libraries should always have documentation to explain how does each function work. It should list all of the parameters and then what, if anything, is going to be returned. So you can see on the screen here that make cake, so that function creates a cake. And it has two different parameters, the tiers, which was the layers, and then the flavor, and that was a string. So all of this together is called a library. Well, in the App Lab, in the code.org world, we have this sort of option. And so another vocabulary term that you need to know is an API, which is an application program interface. Basically, it's a user's manual. Okay. It's specifications for how functions in a library behave and how they can be used. We've learned a lot about JavaScript, but you're never going to know everything. And so it's important to remember that you always have this documentation available to you, especially as we move forward and start creating apps ourselves. You may see a function, you may think to yourself, what does it do? Well, in the API, it will always explain what it does and how that function works. So let's think then. So, what potential problems could come up if I tried to use a function and I didn't know what it was and I didn't know at all, how it interacted? So, think about that for a second. What if there's an error that comes up? Would we, be able to fix it? What happens if if there's a return and it doesn't store it properly? We could run into all kinds of issues. Okay. So this would be similar to looking at the front of the function and then just guessing, what do we think? What do we think average cake does? What type of data is it going to need? And then what kind of data is it going to return? Well, one would assume that it would, um, average cake. Well, is it the average cost of the cake? Is it the average size of the cake? So without any sort of documentation, we could run into all kinds of issues. So my friend wants to use my find smallest function. Is this function ready to be shared in a library? What do we think? So line 1 has the variable smallest, find smallest 3499, and then there's the function. And so if num1 is less than num2, then the smallest equals num1. If not, then the smallest is equal to num2. So what do you think? So we're looking, you know, for global variables. So that kind of helps us determine what is, what are we looking at and what are we doing. So remember, global variables are those that are outside of a function. So this is when the program loads, the variable is created. It's actually kind of sorted or looked at within the function, but it's called outside. And so, let's see if we can get rid of the. So think about using a return maybe to be a little bit more helpful. So before a function gets added, you always want to check to make sure, is there a global variable? If there is, sometimes you'll want to rework that so that you use a local one and then a return instead. You'll want to check if another function is called within that function, which gets a little tricky, but then you've got to make sure that the documentation for both functions is in the library. And then there should be documentation because again, we're not mind readers. We need to know what this is designed to do. So if we look at this, we can see that this is a little bit better. So my function is almost ready to be shared. So think about it. How does this function work? Are all the parameters and the data types, what variables do we have, or excuse me, what are the parameters and what types of data, right? Num1, it's a little glaring, right? It's going to be a number, it's not going to be a string. And we know what's going to be returned because a number is going to be returned. Okay, so let's see what a possible API. Let's see what sort of documentation code.org writes for us. So find smallest. Given two numbers, it finds the smallest. Makes total sense. The parameters are two numbers, right? So num1 is the first number, num2 is the second, and then it returns numbers, and it will return the smaller of the two numbers. So this documentation helps users know exactly what this function find smallest is, what parameters are there, what types of data we're working with, and then what is returned at the end. Okay, so a library needs to have a good name. Just like Mrs. Powers' rules in HTML, if anybody remembers, we never put any spaces in a library name. Now, one thing that's different in a library is that we capitalize the first letter. Okay, so we have cake baker is all of the functions that a cake baker would need in order to, successfully run their business. So libraries can be shared with others. They can use the functions within their own programs as long as they follow the rules that are in that documentation, which makes total sense. We've seen this before. We just didn't know what it was called in the App Lab. Under math, under the math library, we have this rounding function, right? So math.round. So the name of the library is math.round, or math. Round is the name of the function, and then the parameters are listed after it. We're going to skip this slide because I'm not here to help facilitate, but to brainstorm with a partner some functions that might show up in these libraries. Well, if you think about it, what kinds of things does a calculator do? There would probably be, addition, subtraction, multiplication, all of those types of things. So each of those functions would be listed within the calculator library, okay, just as an example. And now we're going to watch this lady. It's going to be weird, I know, watching a video in a video, but watch her as she explains where you can find libraries within the App Lab. Yellow. Hello, my name is Julie, and I'm going to teach you how to use the library tool in App Lab. So once you've written a library, like this example here, then you want to go to the Share button on the top left, click on Show Advanced Options, and then click Share as Library. And click Share as Library again, and then you'll want to give your library a meaningful name. So mine is List Operations, and then you need to give your library description, function to manipulate list. So give it a meaningful description here. You can select all or just select a certain function. I need comments on multiply by, so I cannot add it. So make sure you give all your functions comments first. And then click publish. You can copy this ID to share it with anyone else or share with specific people, but I'm also going to show you how to pull it in any libraries from your class. So now I'm going to move on and we're going to check out how to access someone else's library or pull one into your program. So to pull one in, you're going to click on the gear and then you're going to click on Manage Library. You should see any you've created as well as others from the class, and then you just simply click on the plus. And you can add that library to your program. So now when I go to the Functions tab, I can see my library down here. Just those two functions, but you can see how the comments show up and why mine with function without comments didn't make it. Now, you can go back to the, if you decide you don't want to have other people use your library, so you can access or add other libraries, going back into here and find others, and you can see what you have in here. So if I don't want it in here, I can remove it from my project, clicking on the trash can there. And then I can also, I go back to where I created my library, I can also unpublish it. So if I decide I don't want to share it with anyone anymore, I go back into the Share button and Show Advanced Options, Share as Library, and click the Share as Library button. My function, all the information is still here, and if I scroll down, I can unpublish it, which will make it so it's not shared with anyone anymore. So then I unpublished it. So those are the options you have with libraries in App Lab. Have a great day. All right, friends, we're going to go on to, here's some important vocabulary. Remember, this slideshow is available to you on the stream. So if you want to watch that video again, you can always find it there. So the important vocabulary in this particular lesson is a library. So a group of functions, which also are called procedures, that may be used in creating new programs, and then API, which are the specifications for how functions in a library behave and how they can be used. Again, basically, it's like the user's manual. Okay. All right, so let's go to Unit 7, Lesson 6. So here we're going to go into the App Lab and we're going to look at a couple of the different lessons that they've given us. Let's see. So I'm on code.org. You'll see here that I am lesson 7. I'm on bubble number 2. So it says this program uses the states library from a previous lesson. You'll need to finish the App Lab. Let's see. I'm in the right spot. Nope, I'm not in the right spot. Hold the phone. Okay, so we want to go to the investigate. I was in the practice. So I'm going to go to Unit 7, Lesson 6, Bubble 2. This is just going to show us and let us investigate. Less bubbles at the top. That's how I know that. Okay, so the directions tell us, excuse me, to run this program and then read the code carefully. All right, so let's click Run and pick a state that you want to visit. You can see that I've typed in a few. So let's do Alaska. Ava, this one's for you. So if I type in Alaska and click click, it brings up the flag, the seal, and a picture. Now, what if I type in all caps, Ohio, and click, same thing. So it seems like capitalization doesn't matter, just as an interesting point. So what happens when the button is clicked? Well, and then it says open the function drawer and look at each of the state library functions, mouse over them for documentation. How do these functions work? Okay, so I'm going to pull that up. And I'm going to go over here to functions, and you'll notice now under functions, I have these new ones. So there's this state library function that gives the abbreviation. So you'll notice it takes the word I typed in, Ohio, and it adds the abbreviation. So I'm guessing that's what this function helps with. The next one is it returns an image of the skyline if the state exists. Otherwise, it will give the code.org. So what if I make up a state, right? So powers, oops, you know that powers isn't a state, except here in our classroom. So when you type in something that is not a state, when it searches through the library and it doesn't find this, or excuse me, when it searches through the list, can't find anything, so it spits out the code.org logo to a real state. So here's where that abbreviation comes into place. The skyline down here. The next one says it returns the seal of a given state. So boom, that one. And then here's the random, or excuse me, the state flag, which again gets printed here. And then we have this other function that returns a random state. Okay. So you can see, I mean, all the magic happens. This is, you know, literally a 14-line program, and it does so much. But so we've got the global variable of state that gets declared when the program loads. And then when the click button is done, it gets the information. Line number 7 is that traditional get, right? Whatever's typed in here is assigned to the variable. And then the next one, it looks for the abbreviation, just as I expected, then the skyline, then the state seal, and then the image. Okay, so all of that happens because of first the list, because it's gathering all of this information. If we click up here on data, you'll see that the US states table is where all this information is pulling out of. It wouldn't work if there wasn't a table. Okay. So that's the first bubble. So play around with that one a little bit, and then we'll click finish and we'll go on to the next one. This next app looks like this. So it says to run the program, then read the code carefully, try with several different inputs, discuss with a partner, and then we'll open the function drawer. Okay, so let's see what it does. So I'm going to click run, and I'm going to say, hello, my name is Julie. I'm going to click on, well, it says type in a sentence. The Pigify engine will convert it to Pig Latin. So I'm going to click on it, and it turns into hello, hey, me, ame, es, uli, j. Okay, so I tried it once. So I'll say, have a great day. Pigify, hey, a reggae a day. Okay, so if I look at the functions, you'll notice that we have the strings library first letter, which returns the first letter of a string. And then we have all but first. So again, think about what that's doing. It returns a string with the first character removed. So again, let's look over here to the right. So have ended up ave, A-V-E, with the missing H, right? The strings library dot has vowel is looking for a vowel in the string. Okay, and you'll notice that the return is true or false. True, a vowel is found, or false, you know, a vowel isn't found. Interesting. So then strings library dot split string by space. Whoa, that's a mouthful. So if we look at it, so it splits a string into a list of words. And so it breaks apart everything into individual. So it returns a list. So have would be at 0, A would be at 1, great would be at 2, day would be at 3, right? So it creates a list with each word as a new index in our list, okay? So then if we scroll down and look in our workspace here, so on event, so when this button is clicked, it updates screen. So we look in update screen, and so we have variable text, so it gets the text on line number 8, and then, oops, excuse me, then the true magic happens down here in this pigify function, okay? So if I look at it, so the first thing it does is it splits it into a list, right? Because that's the strings library dot split string by space. So it creates a list, and then here's our for loop. So now it's going to do that transversal where it's going to go through the list. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to get the first letter of each word. So it splits it apart. So the first letter is the variable first, and then the rest of it is split. So again, let's look at have. So first round through, we have first equal to H, and we have rest equal to AVE, and then there's a temporary variable created. Okay, so then it looks at the length of the list, and now it's looking for any word that has a vowel in it. Okay, and if it is, then it adds AY. Okay, so have has a vowel in it, so that's why it added the AY. And then it adds that. So that's why there's that temporary variable is when this loop runs, each time it comes across something that has a vowel, it creates that temporary thing and then adds it to the list. Okay. And then it puts the list all together, and then it literally prints in the box. Okay. Now the directions, I think, told us to test a function, which is why I have the P in the console log. So it says reread the documentation, add a console log statement to the end of the program that calls a function, put in a reasonable argument in the space. For example, console.log string library.first letter and then pizza, and then think about what it's going to output, then click run and see what it does. Okay, so I want you to do the same thing. You don't have to do first letter and you don't have to do pizza, but let me drag this up here. So, so in order to do that, here's what I did. So if I drop in here, so we have console log, parentheses. So here's my string library all but first. And function parentheses. And instead of string, I'll put in my last name. A console. Okay, this parenthesis, that one, this one, this one. Now I have all kinds of extra things. I'm not sure exactly how that happened. Like, what didn't you like? I gotta close semicolon. Okay. I don't know what just happened. So if I look at it, so we have console.log, strings.library, all but first. So what do I think is going to print? Well, I think it's going to print hours, OWERS. So I'll reset, I'll hit run, and in fact, it did. Okay. So play around with some of these new functions in the console log, just like I did. Okay. So I'm going to click finish, and we are done with the first two bubbles of libraries. So from here, now we're going to go learn from the man. I will post, whoops, I scrolled too far. So that was Unit 7, Lesson 5, Unit 7, Lesson 6. I'm going to leave it to the man to do Unit 7, Lesson 7. Here's what it looks like. I'll post this link in the classroom for you to get started. I want you today to finish up all of the bubbles. Oops, sorry, not that screen. All of the bubbles, which is really, there's no bubbles here on 5. So play around with these just as I did in this video, and then go ahead and start lesson 7. I hope by the end of class on Wednesday, we'll be through Unit 7, Lesson 7, and then we're going to work on the project on Thursday.